Thanks, guys. So another one of those scandals where teachers are being brainwashed with Marxist propaganda, this time out of Tennessee. And, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people, oh, well, I live in a conservative state. I live in a conservative district. So we don't have to worry about those weird things in our district. Oh, yes, you do. Okay, this is a district in very conservative Tennessee. Teachers and staff were given a diversity, inclusion, and equity, a DIE course. And they were taught that Christians and people whose ancestors came from Europe, heterosexuals, people who are not in any way confused about their gender. These are all oppressors. They're terrible. And then people who are pagans, people who are polyamorous, which means they practice multiple relationships with multiple sexual partners at the same time. Homosexuals, people confused about their gender. These are all people who are supposedly oppressed. Now, of course, this is not just Tennessee; it's all across the country. But the group Parents Defending Education got a copy of this cultural competence presentation that was given to these teachers and staff in Tennessee through a public records request, and they say the world needs more purple people. And it turns out purple people are people who agree with the Marxist garbage that's being peddled by these Marxists in Tennessee and around the world. And so they've got this really crazy oppressors and oppressed chart, and you can see who is oppressed and who is oppressors. You see it right here. So if you have privilege, if you're white, if you're able-bodied, if you're a man, if you're cisgender, which just means you're not confused about what sex you are, if you're heterosexual, if you're a Christian, if you're middle class, if you're a young adult, a middle-aged adult, and then you are oppressed if you are a person of color. And I kind of resent that remark. I have some color. And I think you probably do too, unless you're albino. But then you'd have a physical disability, maybe. I don't know. Does that make you oppressed? I don't know. This thing is so confusing. But if you have a physical disability, a mental health disability, if you're a woman, if you're trans, if you're non-binary, genderqueer, polyamorous, aromantic, asexual, Muslim, pagan, Sikh, Buddhist, etc., if you're working class, poor, or if you're a child, then you are oppressed. You're a victim of the horrible oppressors. And of course, this is not new, folks. Because we've talked about it many times before. This is actually just the old Marxist claptrap redesigned for America in the modern era. Marx divided people, of course, into bourgeoisie and proletariat, the oppressors being those with money, capital, businesses, means of production, etc. The oppressed being the workers. But, of course, that didn't work really well in America. Also, as you remember, this ideology, so-called, resulted in hundreds of millions of murders over the last century, billions of people enslaved. And yet, this is exactly what Chairman Mao did in China. It's exactly what they're doing here. So the way Mao did it, and we've talked about this, we've had guests on to talk about this, he divided all Chinese up into two categories. There were the black Chinese and the red Chinese. The blacks were the bad guys, the oppressors. They had privilege, right? And so they had to confess their privilege. They had the children stand up and confess to their privilege because their parents might have owned a piece of land. Maybe their parents had a shop or a little business or something. The reds were the commies, the landless peasants, the workers or whatever. And so it didn't take many years of this nonsense before blood is flowing in the streets, millions of people are being killed, children are being turned in by their parents, etc. Now, Marxist theorist Antonio Gramsci and other communists with the Frankfurt School, they took Marxist theory of economic and class warfare and tried to adapt it to the modern United States. And so out of this mess, you got critical theory. Critical race theory is, of course, a descendant of critical theory. And that is the essence of what's in this insane presentation in Tennessee. Their goal is, of course, to inflame as much hatred, division, and conflict as they possibly can so that as the old society collapses in on itself, kind of like they did in China or in Russia or in Cuba or, you name your place, they can rebuild from the ashes. They can build back better, as Joe Biden and his buddies at the UN say, with a much more totalitarian regime. And of course, Jesus alluded to this, right? Multiple times. He says, a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. A kingdom divided against itself will be laid waste. And so that's what they're doing. They want Americans divided against themselves. They want them to view their enemies as their oppressors or their victims. That way they can basically take over. We saw in North Carolina, we actually broke this story at the Newman Report in 2017. They forced Christian children to stand up in front of the classroom and apologize for their Christian privilege. This is just like a struggle session organized by Chairman Mao. And of course, this is what they're doing today. And it's the same thing that China and the commies did before that society descended into an orgy of violence, hatred, and mass murder. In Tennessee, this presentation, they also had a slide on trauma from language and some of the traumatic triggering terms. Make this for your mommy. Apparently, birthing parent would have been more appropriate. The slide actually doesn't say explicitly what would be better. They also say if you ask the children about their Christmas, that is going to be triggering. That is going to be trauma. Also, if you say, I don't see color, yep, you are in trouble. You're an extremist. And so there you go. They also, folks, it's just unbelievable, this presentation. I hope you'll see it. Now, the people who got this, Parents Defending Education, they put out a statement. So when a teacher trains teachers saying the words mommy and Christmas cause trauma, we know we're dealing with unserious people, which is, of course, true. But these unserious people, Erica Sanzi says, are wielding great power in their attempt to indoctrinate teachers into this repugnant belief that being white or male or heterosexual or Christian or able-bodied or an adult makes you an oppressor is destructive and intellectually bankrupt. And, of course, it is, folks. So this is terrible. The district involved, they said, well, you know, the presentation was developed independently by educators and not developed by the district. So, yeah, whatever. We didn't do anything. It says we're in compliance with state law. We do not require implicit bias training for employees, and so shove it. Keep learning this madness. So, folks, all the folks out there who think I live in a conservative state or a conservative district, so I can keep sending my kids to government school, this is Exhibit 437,925, showing that that is not true. It's poison everywhere. Your kids are being indoctrinated. They're being destroyed. Doesn't matter what state you're in. It doesn't matter what district you're in. And if this is not stopped, it's going to destroy your kids, your family, your community, and even our civilization. So stop begging your school board to leave your children alone. Get your kids out of this pseudo education system, or get ready to lose your country and your kids. Thanks, folks.